My next talk is about scanning of plum cultivars for CO2 sensitivity. Just a quick introduction. Obviously, like we all heard, moisture loss and shrivel are a concern in the plum industry, and not also the plum industry, but in stone fruit in general. High relative humidity in the supply chain reduces the fruit VBD deficit and thus protect against moisture loss and consequent shrivel. Closing of the vents in a shipping container may increase the relative humidity and limit the shrivel. So that was one option that we looked at. But obviously there's a risk that the respiration may escalate the CO2 levels to an extent that it can damage the plums in transit. So in 2019, Arie de Kock did work that was like a pilot trial for this, and we found that for Fortune and September Yummy plums, they were not sensitive to the increase in the CO2 levels of up to 6%, and it improved the maintenance of the flesh firmness, as well as decreased the internal disorders that was exhibited in this fruit. So that was a very good outcome on those two cultivars. We actually found, though, that Letitia plums were very sensitive to higher CO2 levels in that year. So the objective was to determine the CO2 sensitivity of 4 single temperature plums, to identify realistic CO2 threshold values that will not damage the plum quality, and if the cultivars exhibit CO2 sensitivity, and then it will be replaced by other cultivar the following year. So the fruit were packed for export that was sourced from commercial pack houses. We used Ruby Sun, Ruby Star, African Delight, and Angelinos in this project. The first treatment was the untreated control, your regular atmosphere. Then our second treatment was modified atmosphere, where we used 2% CO2 and the balance were O2, oxygen. So treatment 3 was 4% CO2, and then the fourth one was 6% CO2. And the fruit was stored at 7 days at normal regular atmosphere. Then it was followed by 20 days MA at minus 0.5 that simulated those CO2 levels in those treatments, and then it followed again with 15 days at normal regular atmosphere. It was a total of 6 weeks. We could see that in the results, if we look at the Ruby Suns, you can clearly see that there was a positive effect in retaining flesh firmness with the 4% and the 6% compared to the untreated control. There were also no shrivel levels at the 4% and no internal browning at the 4%, sorry, and the 6% there was no shrivel. So there were no real negative effects of higher CO2 levels on the Ruby Sun fruit. If we look at the Angelinos that were also stored for 42 days at minus 0.5, we can, just want to go back. We could see there was no negative effect of the elevated CO2 levels compared to the untreated control. If you look at the flesh firmness, shrivel levels, or any other internal disorders, there was quite a lot of aerated tissue that was visible, but there were no clear differences between the treatments. So it was, so the conclusion that we had was that the higher CO2 levels gave good flesh firmness retention for the Ruby Sun, and lower shrivel levels after shelf life with no significant, non-significant elevation in the internal browning. With Angelinos, there was no sensitivity to elevated CO2, but the aerated tissue levels were extremely high after the cold storage and shelf life throughout. In the case of the African Delight that we tested, it exhibited slightly higher skin cracks at the higher CO2 concentrations, with increased CO2 levels had no other negative effect on the quality. So that might be due to moisture in the CO bags that were maybe an issue, and not specifically the CO2 itself. It is recommended to retest, and we did this past season. We're still waiting on the results to be analysed. Initial findings said obviously that Ruby Sun and Angelino can withstand the 6% CO2 with a balance at 15% O2 without negative effect on the quality of the fruit. And obviously the next season we'll actually try to look at the effect of what in a commercial container, what the levels can get to if you close the vents, but we'll discuss that at a later stage. Thank you very much.